to get me in trouble, but when's this ever stopped me before? The Chinese have said, may you live in interesting times. They don't say let you live in passive times. So anyway, so for her art, she wants her art on cars. So now that car is traveling around, yes? Okay, what's the water ball doing? It's traveling around. Well, a tattoo goes on a human being. What do human beings do that's consistent with cars and water balls?
They walk around.
Walk around. So she's a person who wants her art to be seen by people who are walking around, out in public. That's different from somebody who makes like a sculpture or somebody who makes a painting and then puts it into a museum. That person wants people to come to the art to see it. This person wants their art to go to the people. Now this is happening at a level that I don't know that she totally internalized. She might have. Especially if she's seeing this video. I'm going to say she's very smart and I appreciate her intellect, so maybe she did think about this. But maybe not. And then she mentioned a few other things, but she said that she wants her art to be like Disney. That she wants it to be like all over the place and not just like in one specific area. So she's also very kind of broad-minded and she's also very entrepreneurial. But there's something interesting that's there about the art, that she wants the art to go out to the people, not the people to come to the art, if this makes sense. And it's kind of like that with, and I've never, what I found so interesting about this person is that I've never heard it expressed this way. So when I asked her, when I said to her, I want to know more about your art, and she was kind of taken by this. I don't think many people probably ask her, because the field that she works in, probably not very many people ask her about this stuff. So then when she was talking about it, you could see her getting kind of like animated about it, but then also kind of pulling back, because you're not supposed to get too animated by supposed to quotation marks, right? And then I asked her, so what inspires you? And she was just like frozen for a second. She's like, oh wow. And that big like takes over. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you're a person, if you get asked a big question, that's how you respond to it. Like, how do I even answer this? It's not that you don't have an answer. It's just that all of the answers are flooding in at once, and it's like, which one do you pick? Or maybe you've never really practiced articulating that. It's like if you're a musician, and the first time you do an interview, someone asks you, so what inspires you? You start fishing around for an answer. The 500th magazine that interviews you and they ask you, so what inspires you? You have a ready-made answer right off the bat. So this was really cool, because that meant that I was asking this person questions that they've probably not been asked before. And so I'm getting like a ground view, a ground level view of what goes on in this person's mind. They're coming to an understanding of why they want to do the art that they want to do. And it's superficial to just kind of be like, why do you want to do art on cars? I just like cars. No, there's more to it than just that. 'Cause otherwise you could design bumpers. You could design, glove compartments or something like that if you just like cars. There's a reason that you want to put it onto cars. But that's what happens with the artist a lot of times. The artist doesn't even know what they're doing. They make something and then they just kind of go, huh. Because the artist, the art comes from inside, but the art also comes from something ethereal out here that the artist is kind of grasping onto and pulling onto and taking out of the ether and pulling into the world and then presenting it to us. And that's why sometimes there'll be like a song or a painting or something like that that we'll look at and we'll think, that's weird. And then you fast forward 20 years, and then we look back on it and we're all, that was really cool. It was just way ahead of its time. The audience wasn't ready for it yet. And that's because they were pulling stuff out of the ether that was, they didn't really understand necessarily why they were doing it, but once they presented it to us, they didn't present it to us in a way that we understood it today. They presented it in a way that's understood 20 years from now. I don't know if this makes any sense.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's neat to be able to talk to someone like that, who before that day was a complete stranger to me, and to get those kind of ground level insights. And it's also neat because then when you talk to this person about it, they're starting to realize some things about themselves, and they realize, this is a person who can bring these things out of me. And that's a neat thing to be to a person. Think about the kinds of questions that you ask people when you're talking to them. When you ask them, what do you like to do for fun? Something real superficial like that. Like, someone tell me, what do you like to do for fun? Someone tell me. Yeah.
Drawing.
Why?
Art. Because it's just like, it's just something that I like to do because it gives me it's not that it gives me time, but I like to do it because it helps me like make my ideas into reality almost.
Where do you get your ideas from?
A lot of the things that inspire me, like the creative genre.
Like what? Like in other words, when you create stuff, are you creating the things that you experience from other genres, and then you're trying to imitate that, or is it that what you're experiencing sparks new ideas and you're trying to express those?
It's a combination of both. I find stuff from other genres and I like mold it together with my ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this like 60s aesthetic, you know, like oh yeah, the Cold War detective. But I also like this other genre, like a cyberpunk idea. So I mash them together and I'm like, wow, you know.
So you have to take ideas that are already there, put them together, and present them in an updated form. Okay. You see how much we learned about AJ in just a few questions? And that's so different from, so what do you like to do for fun? Draw. That's so cool.
Man, I love that.
Do you feel like I actually care about your art? I want to know about, yeah. And that's the thing you also said, and by the way, I do. And that's the thing, it's about being genuine, it's about being honest, but it's also about being curious. And so should I have asked, if I didn't care about his art, I just shouldn't have asked him about that. I should have asked him about something I do care about. Do you follow?
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that helps us to kind of really come together. A lot of our conversations are so superficial. We're afraid of asking questions that are, I mean, we're so afraid of like coming off as weird. But the reason that we would come off as weird is because we're just not used to a person asking questions. And not asking him like, so, where do you live? What's your address? How many entrance points do you have to your house? Do you use a security system? That's odd. That would be strange. But if it's something that the person's interested in, like I was talking to one of my former students, she just graduated last year. I was talking to her recently, and she was telling me that she just doesn't really have, she works somewhere locally, she was telling me she just doesn't have any friends. And I asked her, why don't you have any friends? And she said, just immediately after I asked her, she said, because I'm weird. Is she weird? Yes. And I said to her, I can see that. I can see that because she is weird. But she's really interesting. Like if you talk to her and you ask her about, it's hard to explain. You know how rarely I would say to you that you should go to college? It's pretty rare. She should go to college. She really should. And she is going. But she should actually probably go off and become a PhD in clinical psychology. I think that she would be absolutely fantastic at that work. But when I say that she's weird, what I mean by that is if you ask her, how's the weather? You know, or you start talking about the weather, she won't talk to you about the weather. Why? Because she doesn't care about the weather. And if you're a person that all you can talk about is the weather, she won't talk to you. She will literally walk away from you and just be like, okay, well, talk to him about the weather, which I saw her do, by the way. She was in my room during nutrition break one time, and there was a guy trying to talk to her, and he was saying like, oh, this weather is crazy, huh? And she asked him, do you really want to talk about the weather? and she narrowed her eyes, she's like, do you really want to talk about the weather? And he's like, well, I don't know what to talk about. And so she said, well, when you do, talk to me. And she walked away. And she didn't say it like in a bitchy, like, well, when you do, just, that really is her personality. I knew her as a 10th grader, and then I knew her as a 12th grader. And that's the way that she is. And so if you're somebody, and then she has like one really good friend, and I asked her, wait, I know you're still friends with so-and-so. And she said, yeah. I go, what makes you guys such good friends? And she said, he's interesting. He asks questions, and he listens, and he can give answers. That was her whole criteria for having a close friend. And I was thinking, like, you could boil that down. That kind of could be a formula for having any close friend, isn't it? So you ask that question, well, why do we spend so much time on superficial conversations and adding little laughing emojis that we don't really mean? Like, how many of you have messaged back to someone, LMFAO, and you're just sitting there? Or the laughing emoji where he's actually crying, and you're just like, go back to your TV show. Because we recognize that there's something, we should recognize that there's something inauthentic about that mode of communication. And so I ask you, which of these modes of communication would actually be more useful? And if I start asking him about his art, and he's like, why do you want to know about my art? I've also learned something about him. He's also very guarded. He's also very shielded. And I've also learned that he's not a person who likes to talk about his passions. Therefore, I would not talk to this person. And not in a sense of like, I don't want to talk to you. It's just like, you're not interesting. I can't have a conversation with you. And if that's the case, there are other things I could be doing. I won't ask you to raise your hands, because it would be ironic if I did. But I wonder how many of you guys are introverts. Oh, I'm an introvert. No, you're not an introvert. Yeah.
I'm in the middle.
But if you're most people are, by the way. But one of the things that characterizes introverts is not wanting to have superficial conversations, because you don't want to talk about the weather. You don't want to talk about, even like sports if it's not interesting to you. You want to talk about things that matter. Like I remember, when I made that comment earlier, like what scares you the most? That actually came from a conversation I had one time. I was a musician before. I was in this band, and we were upstairs in the green room getting ready for a performance. And there's always like people around. And there's this girl, and she starts talking to me, and she's like, oh my God, I love your band, because she'd seen us before. And then she's like, I love your band. She wants to start talking about my band. And I stopped and I asked her, what scares you the most? She's like, what? And I go, what scares you the most? And she stops and she says, that's a weird question. I said, yeah, but I want to talk about my band. I want to talk about something real. And she just goes, okay, I'm going to go get a drink. You want a drink? I said, I don't drink. Okay. Bye. She just wanders away, and I went back to my book. 'Cause yes, I was reading a book in the green room. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks later ago, we were playing again. She came up to me, and she said, I thought about what you asked me last time. We ended up having a conversation about the things that scare us the most. She just wasn't prepared for that conversation in that venue at that time, and this is fine. People are like this sometimes. And I asked that question specifically because I knew it was going to be something that would be odd and strange, But imagine if I'd asked her around the bat, what scares you the most? And she just stops and goes,
Death.
Not being remembered. Like, really? And then we had a conversation. Wouldn't that have been a fascinating person to talk to? A person who was so willing to share themselves right off the bat just like that. That would have been a fantastic conversation, especially in that context. Like, that's a weird place to have it. It's like proposing to somebody at a funeral. You don't expect it, but there's something beautiful about it, isn't it? End of one thing, beginning of another.
Yes. I'm going to do that.
I got an idea now. All I need now is a funeral. Because it always comes back to death in this class.
Oh, guys, we should propose on Scanlon's funeral. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, we should. That would be funny. Scanlon would have wanted this. I'm going to be in the coffin. Don't do it. To come back from the dead just to warn us, to tell us all. I shall tell you all.
Everyone's going to be pointing, Scanlon's alive! Wait, no, he's not.
And then hopefully one of you will be sitting in the corner scratching your chin and using your frown like, but did he ever really live? So we're all so much together, especially today, because you guys, it's so easy to connect with people. You sit next to someone. I wonder how many of you have this. That's so fucking weird. I'll tell you about it in a minute. I was just thinking about this as I was walking into campus today. Now it comes up here. There's a person here who's a teacher who sent me a friend request on Instagram. But the person, I've never spoken with them before. And they were here, and then they left. And then as soon as they left, they sent me a friend request. So I accepted it. And then the person came back. When they came back, they stopped following me. I just noticed them. I'm like, okay. So I can figure out maybe what this is about. But I wonder how many of you are that way, that you have friends who you're in classes with or whatever, and you've never spoken with. And yet you're friends on Instagram. And you watch each other, but you never really connect to each other. I guess you're connected. I guess you're together in this way. The person can see your story. The person can see what's going on in your life. And in some strange way, they know what's going on in your life, but they don't know your middle name. Or maybe even your first name. All they know is some strange Instagram name that you have. And this is weird. I have people who send me Instagram requests. I have students who will send me an Instagram request, and I'll be like, who the hell is Jocko 1850? Who the hell is this guy? No, look at the picture, I'm like, I don't recognize this person. And they'll sit in my box for like a year until they finally put their real name. I go, oh, hey, I know that dude, what's up? Because we're all so much together. And so we're so connected, and even living in cities and living in these classrooms and being together, we're so connected. And yet, I wonder how many of you guys look around and maybe you've heard this before. No, not that life is suffering.
A miracle.
Life is a miracle. That's not what you meant. That you're never alone, but you're alone all the time.
Yeah.
I mentioned that song a few weeks ago. Yeah, that you're never really alone, but you're alone all the time. You're so much together with people, but you're dying of loneliness. And it's an interesting choice here that he says. He's dying of loneliness. Not just that we're lonely, but that we're dying of it. And he probably doesn't necessarily, well, I'll tell you, he doesn't necessarily mean like a physical death. It isn't like your body's decaying because you're alone, but your soul is. Because there's something about us as humans that even as we're introverts, we still have these dual natures of ourselves. We have this biological thing. I was just talking about this other classes past few days. You have a biological part of yourself, and this is the physical part of yourself. And this is the part of yourself that, I'm sorry to tell you, is going to die eventually. But then there's also this other part of yourself, which all of us have. You can call it your symbolic self. Your symbolic self. And this is the thing that we put our hopes and dreams into. This thing, it's a lost cause, I'll tell you. It's the ultimate statistic. 10 out of 10 of us die. And again, you can look that up. It's a true story. This part is going to go away. So then what's your hope for the future? It's here. It's in the symbolic. In other words, you can't survive death, but you can symbolically survive death. So we do things to make ourselves feel a lot less alone. We have families, and one of the reasons that people will say they want to have children is because now I'll never be alone. I'm always going to have this child. Yeah, unless they end up hating you and moving away.
Yeah.
Don't worry, man, they'll come back. Just be good, they'll come back.
Be a good parent.
Yeah, be a good parent. And then what it is to, and by the way, if you want to know what a good parent is, come and talk to me. I can tell you what a perfect parent is, I can tell you how to do it perfectly. And why is it that I can tell you?
Because you're not a parent.
Because I'm not a parent.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to say what a perfect parent is, because I don't have to actually do it.
Yeah.
So, family, you're going to follow sports teams. You're going to listen to music, and you're going to wear t-shirts that will talk about your music. You're going to join a political party. You'll go to a party to meet people.
Party part two.
Talking about politics.
Yeah, you'll get a tattoo. You'll do all kinds of things that help us to find ready-made groups of people, because it's so hard for us to sit there on the trolley and turn to the person next to us and ask them, what scares you the most?
Did you know that life is suffering?
Yeah, exactly. Probably not the best venue to ask someone that question on a moving trolley. What scares you the most? What would you do if someone started shooting? Not good questions, But you'd be surprised. I was teaching a jiu-jitsu class last year, and one of my former students came to the class last night to train, and take a guess what I told the class.
What scares you the
most?
most? Oh, life is suffering.
Life is suffering. We were talking about the difference between pain and injury. And there's a difference between pain and injury. Injury means something's going to break. Pain is just like you're suffering. And I told him, hey, life is suffering.
Life is pain.
We don't get to choose not to suffer, but we can choose what we're going to suffer for. So if someone's pressuring on you and you're having trouble breathing, you're not dying. It just feels like it. So how do you resist that? And that's one of the reasons I like martial arts so much, because you learn, those are lessons you carry over from that into life. There's a difference between pain and injury. Injury is when someone's snapping your arm, and if you don't do something, it's going to break. That's injury. Pain is just when someone's pressuring on you, or they're shoving your chin in a certain direction, and your spine doesn't want to go that way, and it hurts. That's pain. But this is true about a lot of things in life, too. You're going to experience things in life that are going to injure you psychologically or emotionally, or they're just painful psychologically and emotionally. And being able to distinguish between the two. There are relationships that you're in that are going to injure you if you don't get out of them. There are relationships in life that are going to injure you if you don't get out of them. There are some relationships you're in that are painful, but they're not injuring you. And being able to distinguish between those two. And being able to distinguish between those two in such a way that you can get out before something bad happens to you. Or to know, I can't keep running away from relationships. A friend of mine, I was talking, she she has this thing of just impermanence in her life. And so when she gets into arguments in her relationships, she just runs away. Just fast. Boom, she's gone. She was living with somebody, and they got into an argument, she was telling me, and something silly. I go, well, what'd you do? She said, oh, I just went there when he wasn't there. I took all my stuff and I left. I'm like, you were living with him? She said, yeah. And you just went there and took his stuff and left. She goes, yeah. I go, what'd he say? She said, I don't know, I blocked him. Well, that's a hell of a commitment to make to someone, to move in with them, buy furniture with them, and then just disappear. And then she's like, well, when I was a kid, I struggled. And I said, well, now you're an adult. You got to figure out if what you did injured you, or if what you did was just painful. And so we got to figure those things out, because some of us will push people away, the people that we do connect with, and then we wonder why we're so lonely. And then some of us will keep the wrong people around, and we're wondering why we're so injured psychologically. So wisdom is figuring out the difference between those two. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Thursday.